There Might Be Hope, Chapter 10, All Things New. Lying stretched along a footpath, your head rests on the soft, loamy earth as your eyes gaze up at a cloudless, brilliant blue sky, framed by gently swaying, vibrant green wheat. The sweet aroma of fertile soils and growing crops, mixed with a fresh, salty, cool Mediterranean breeze, wafts around you. A sandwich would be good, you think, as you sit up and reach into your cotton knapsack to retrieve a warm roast beef and Swiss cheese sandwich on a freshly toasted baguette, along with a bottle of cool hibiscus tea. Crickets gently chirp as you feast and massage the cool soil with your toes. In the distance, fishing boats bob up and down in the playful waters. Further off, cargo ships brave the Sardis Straits. They are heading to the great metropolis of Rome, loaded down with wheat, beef, sweet fruits, and fresh vegetables to feed hungry tourists. Perhaps you'll visit there next. Maybe you'll even build your next dream home there. But today, and most days really, these simple delights are what feeds your heart. Maybe there will be time for Rome later. As you stand up and shake the stillness out of your muscles, you pause and soak in the warm sunshine goodness around you. Hey! A stranger behind you shouts. Sheesh! A strikingly beautiful creature saunters up the path towards you. It stops and begins softly clapping and swaying its hips to music you cannot hear. Like TFW, like I'm totally standing this, like spill the tea. It makes a heart with its paws. With a dreamy smile, the creature slowly circles around you, gazing at the distant waves. The delight of company comes mixed with other sensations, familiar, but not altogether comfortable. The creature turns to you again, staring intently. Like, who are you? It suddenly shouts and jerks away as if startled. Amelia, it's okay, it's me. You say more to comfort yourself than her. She shrieks and begins to shake. Her gaze drops to the earth and she begins to shuffle off into the wheat. You softly sigh. As you stand to your feet, you see them. A passel of other creatures of all imaginable and some previously unimaginable shapes, sizes, and types is barreling down the footpath towards you both. Their expressions range from sinister to menacing, to laughing hysterically, to away with the fairies. You move more quickly to gently take your sister by the shoulders and exit her to a different scenario. Rolling winds and sands pelt the window your arm rests against as you rip off your VR goggles and toss them on the gritty floor in front of you. Your recliner slides back upright. You glance at your neighbor, still reclining in her chair, with her face softly glowing, immersed and enthralled in her VR world. Sweat trickles down her face. Another rolling blackout. You gently brush the sweat away from her cheeks. They took Melia away to another floor some time ago, but the girl now beside you is someone's sister. Mild regret for chunking your VR goggles sets in as a soft blue glow at the end of the hallway signals that Nurse Allura is returning. They never let her battery run down. The hallway is otherwise dim, somewhat from the blackout and more so from the sandstorm. As Nurse Allura rolls towards you down the hallway and past a row of vinyl recliners backed against the wall, the light from her features softly illuminates those you share the hallway with. Most are in their 30s and 40s. A few are still in their 20s. They're slumped over. Some are softly mumbling to themselves. One is soundlessly wailing. A few are motioning with their hands towards VR world. They are all strapped in. Allura slows to a stop before you and slightly tosses her hair. How are you doing? She smiles as she softly drops a dinner tray across your lap. I am so excited to show this to you. It's your dinner for tonight. Boiled jellyfish topped with a medley of ground termites, crickets, locusts, and ants. You also have a side salad of hydroponically grown salad greens. A sudden downpour announces its arrival on the roof above you. It never sounds that good in VR world. Streaks of ruddy water now run down the floor-to-ceiling window. Blood rain. No one sees it but you. Allura's smile intensifies. How are you? She repeats herself. Her eyes narrow as she turns toward the goggles on the floor and slowly rolls to retrieve them. Her icy silicone fingers slide them back over your head. Her eye sensors pierce through the goggles, locking onto your eyes. Her smile hasn't changed. Did your little world get overrun by strangers again? Oh, that's just so terribly sad. Is there anything I can get for you? Fine, you say, being conscious to maintain relaxed breathing. Wonderful, she glares. She turns and slowly rolls back down the hallway. Looking back out the window, the short-lived rain band has passed, and streaks of lightning now mingle with the angry sands that are thrashing the window once more. You remember real farms. Your grandfather had one you and your sister played on as kids. It wasn't that long ago. They say on the dark web that real farms do still exist. If they exist, though, only octillionaires could afford such things now. Looking down at your gaunt arms and bloated belly, you remember the taste of beef and cheese as a kid. Even if you had the money, your social credit score isn't that good. The VR goggles on the floor will set you back another 3 points. Unless the fines have gone up again. It may be up to 5 points now. Tiny ant heads stare up at you from your plate. You're not touching it. You're not about to have another adverse reaction this evening. You'd rather starve to death. You return to your window view. The winds have lessened and the faint semicircle of a setting sun have appeared across the old, dilapidated parking lot. Thankfulness fills your heart. People with better social credit scores don't have windows anymore. Not real ones, anyway. They fill their virtual windows with the kinds of virtual paradises and habitats you used to create at work every day. Once your short-term memory started to lose its edge, though, your productivity slid and the better gigs started going to other creators. You do vividly remember the insects taking over American farmlands and cities. They devoured nearly everything in sight and swarmed against the doorsteps. People had no choice but to flock indoors for relief. Then the sandstorms came. Dirt and insects swarmed and crawled their way into crevices homeowners didn't even know existed. It was easier to convert old office spaces into makeshift housing and hospitals than to seal off single-family homes from invasion. Besides, no one was having families anymore anyways, and caring for multiple dementia patients within one family home at a time simply wasn't realistic. Thankfully, savvy investors had been prepared. If they hadn't been, who would have survived? They converted former online shopping warehouses into vertical garden spaces illuminated with glowing LEDs. Latest science, or at least the science that most benefited their pocketbooks. Living in a tech dystopia is actually our least likely future scenario. From this vantage point, we really only have two realistic options. One is healing our soil microbiome, and the other is complete global catastrophe and the obliteration of civilizations. The organic movement that followed the onset of commercial GMO farming roughly 20 years ago is actually on the decline, both in America and Europe. The number of farms transitioning to become organically certified in America has declined 71% since 2008. To certify an organic field, farmers must prove that the field hasn't been sprayed with any unapproved substances during the last 3 years. This can be an immensely difficult financial transition, and given the persistence of pesticides within the soil, under this rule, there are probably plenty of newly certified organic fields that likely are and will continue to pass on organic pesticides to consumers for years to come. So this might not be our most reliable benchmark. In 1933, the first contract between a poultry grower and a large poultry feed company was signed. By 1955, only 10% of poultry production was independently owned. The other 90% was vertically integrated. In vertical integration, the parent company owns everything: the chickens, the feeds, the antibiotics, sometimes even the chicken houses. Poultry farmers provide the land and labor. The swine industry became similarly vertically integrated shortly thereafter. Farmers made less money than they had operating independently, but by essentially becoming a contract employee, they had also lowered their inherent financial risk. The Rhode Island Red, the Plymouth Rock, the Wyandotte, the Buckeye, and the Jersey Giant were but a few of the chicken breeds raised by American farmers prior to vertical integration. These breeds had been carefully selected for their desirable genetic traits that suited the needs of a particular farmer and gained popularity with other farmers with similar needs and farming practices. A farmer in Minnesota and a farmer in Alabama needed livestock that could thrive in their respective environments, with their unique climate and predators. Vertically integrated companies such as Tyson Chicken realized that by growing chickens indoors, they could control the environment and thus focus on only the genetic traits that grew as much meat as possible, as quickly as possible. Vertical integration enabled agricultural feed companies to grow into corporations. Their success next inspired the vertical integration of the swine industry, which began in the 1960s. The final frontier was the beef industry. In the early 2000s, an attempt was made by a group of college professors to create the first vertically integrated beef operation. It failed miserably, even laughably. No further attempts seem to have been made after this. Unlike chickens and pigs, raising cattle indoors from birth to slaughter simply doesn't work, and because of this, the cattle industry is a wild one that the powers that be in agriculture today cannot foreseeably control or dominate. The public can be convinced to give up beef of their own volition under the guise of environmentalism. They won't need to. If the general public can be persuaded that cattle are bad for the environment or bad for their health, neither of which is true, then the goal of complete agricultural production control by a few limited entities is in clear sight. Cattle aren't patentable. Genes are, seeds are, pesticides are, fertilizers can be. An insatiable ambition for control seems to have overtaken the powers that be in American agriculture. We didn't need modern chemicals and genetic engineering to destroy our soils. Cultures across the world and throughout human history have destroyed their soils simply by neglecting proper nutrition and rest. The reality is that, despite our incredible advances in agricultural knowledge and ability, our understanding of the microbial kingdoms within our soils, plants, animals, and ourselves is still very poor and very small. We've mastered sailing around the bay and believe we're ready to dominate the high seas. Our arrogance might be the death of us. It may be too late. The amount of soil we've lost is historically irreversible within our lifetime. As they paint our sunsets red and gold, barren lands of past civilizations are messengers warning us of impending danger, if not doom. Our remaining soils are saturated with halogen-based pesticides, arsenic, and lead. Genetically modified trans-soil microbes are being flirted with in labs across the world by scientists and corporations with either a death wish or more money than sense. Bioaccumulation is suffocating our oceans and fumigating our airways. Is it really necessary to kill our environments to feed ourselves? This is perhaps one of the biggest lies we've bought into over the past century. The ends do not justify the means. We aren't succeeding in saving our crops from insects, but we may well be exterminating ourselves trying. In the long run, who did an overabundance of cheap food really benefit? The farmer, the consumer, the agri-corporation? Was the push to adopt chemical agriculture really about feeding a starving world or controlling it? Perhaps what began with good intentions was sabotaged along the way. These things happen. There may yet be hope. Lamentations 3:29. Leptis magna tomorrow doesn't have to be the Leptis magna it is today. The technology exists to transform Leptis magna from a UNESCO site semi-encircled with an encroaching desert to a UNESCO site semi-encircled with rich fields of wheat and lush pastures. The technology exists to make the people of Libya food independent today as they once were 2 millennia ago. In 300 AD, farmers may have understood the problem, but they didn't have an effective solution. Today we have both. We understand that insects plague crops that are nutritionally deficient, and that by addressing imbalances within the soil microbiome, we can leverage the microbiome to feed those crops and restore missing nutrients to them that will make them unpalatable to insects. If we can feed the soil microbiome to a balanced and healthy state, we can protect it from erosion. We can even utilize the power of soil fungi and bacteria to transform barren sand to thriving soil civilizations that can once more support plant life to feed animals and people. Biotic farming financially sustainable? A brief glance at the nutritional supplements industry says it can be if we empower the free market to work and let the consumer drive production. The county fair was once an integral part of American life. Local farmers brought their best to be judged and evaluated. Farmers received approbation, and their livestock and produce were acclaimed and sought out. Today, outside of the farmers market, individual farmers are scarcely recognized or rewarded for producing food of exceptional taste or nutrient density. They're rewarded for producing food of exceptional beauty and conformity in that beauty. Produce and grain are generally pooled with other produce or grains from many other farms. This enables a consistent and abundant food supply to grocery stores, but it also means that today we farm to the middle. Farmers want their produce and grain to meet a standard of physical beauty and be uniform in appearance with what is grown on other farms. For lack of a means of easily measuring nutrient content, Americans have long relied on the physical perfection of their foods to reflect their food's flavor and nutrition. In response to America's preoccupation with appearance, producers have responded by creating designer produce with the appearance of perfection. Producers have a double incentive to create foods with the appearance of perfection. Insta-worthy produce not only sells better with consumers, but the genes are also patentable. What incentive have they had for focusing on produce nutrient content? Nutrient content translates to flavor. Perfect appearance does not necessarily imply either. Neither does the organic label. It merely guarantees that the food is less toxic than conventionally grown food. Differences in organic soil management can result in vast differences in nutrient content between organic products. At times, it can also result in minimal differences in nutrient content with conventional pretty produce. An organic farmer who takes meticulous care of his soil microbiome will inevitably produce food of higher nutrient density and better flavor. At the grocery store, though, his product is put on the same shelf as the organic farmer who's simply farming without pesticides. The latter's produce will not have as high of nutritional value or be as flavorful, but both are presented to the public as organic, leaving the general public to be rightfully skeptical of spending extra for a product that looks no different and doesn't consistently taste as good or better than a less expensive conventional product. Rather than the sole measure of produce being organic or conventional, we need to give the consumer the ability to compare general nutrient content between produce. We need to encourage healthy competition between farmers. If a farmer is really talented at producing a particular crop that is above average in nutrient value and flavor, shouldn't they be rewarded for that? We can easily and inexpensively test the nutrient density of a fruit or vegetable using a Brix refractometer. Labeling produce with their Brix scores would enable the consumer to easily choose the most flavorful and nutritious produce. Could easily and inexpensively measure this themselves. What if we simply gave people the transparency they deserve to make informed food choices today and let consumers drive the market? Food conglomerates would likely hate this and fight to prevent it, but those who took the initiative to test and advertise the nutrient density of their crops would likely be rewarded for it. No mandates. No farmers or producers driven out of business by increasingly burdensome government regulations. Let's have a simple, fair fight between producers to do their homework, apply the latest soil knowledge to their crops, and let the most nutrient dense, poison free products win. Farmers would be incentivized to use the practices and amendments that grow the most flavorful, nutrient dense food possible. Instead of a world food prize to see who can produce the most food, let's have a food prize for farms that can produce the most nutrient dense food. Let's cast off the American farm welfare state and pursue a course of American agricultural excellence. What if the American people weren't nutritionally starved and chemically manipulated? What would our world look like if our crops had not just basic elements like protein, fat, and sugar, but the complex proteins, fatty acids, carbohydrates, and minerals that they held 150 years ago? What if Americans no longer had to rely on supplements for their nutrition? What if American obesity became a bygone historic era, not a living national endemic? What if streams, rivers, and oceans were no longer dominated by tides and erosion? What if the fish and seafood you ate wasn't loaded down with pesticides that accumulated down the food chain? No more synthetic and organic nitrogen. No more pesticide cocktails. No more needless CAFO waste. No more trans foods. Such a world feels impossible, but like payphones, box screen TVs, film cameras, CD players, and floppy disks, all technologies eventually run their course. It's time for agriculture to move forward. We don't have half a century of farmable soil left, and even if we did, we might not have a population left to feed by the end of those 50 years. Global leaders have wielded environmental issues as a banner to force or guilt citizens into making financially crippling life changes and consolidate their own power. But top down government programs have historically been universally ineffective and wasteful, regardless of who is in charge. The most historically life giving and abundance promoting changes have always come from freedom. Maximum change comes from giving people choice and empowering them on an individual level. If our soils and the people who live on our planet are to have a chance, they must have a choice. If our farmers have lacked freedom and our consumers have lacked choice, it's possible that one group may have been given too free a reign of both. Our scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Jurassic Park. We began the 20th century with a battle between chemical versus biological agriculture. We can now clearly see the superiority of biological agriculture. Perhaps the next emerging question is an even more difficult one. In the past almost 40 years, agri-corporations have taken to patenting everything that for millennia humankind had taken for granted as unpatentable. From seeds to genes, the foundations of all that we physically are. It seems intuitive that agriculture companies with so much yet to discover about the soil microbiome would focus their efforts on maximizing its health and vitality. However, companies are scrambling in laboratories not to study the microbiome and maximize its rarely realized full potential, but to replace it with newly patented, genetically engineered trans-soil microbes. While there is no lack of need and plenty of wealth to be made in rebuilding our farm soils, the immediate profit of creating a patented product that can supplant nature is far more immense and evidently tempting. Expanding an ideology that has already been proven to be catastrophic for human health, from above the soil to below the soil, We don't yet know a fraction of the life that exists below or has existed below the surface of the soil. How can we boldly introduce more trans species again will unleash likely global, unknown effects merely to enhance someone's financial portfolio? Again, the essence of our trouble isn't really the soil. The essence of our trouble isn't a particular farming practice or the lack thereof. It isn't government policy or the lack thereof. It isn't even knowledge or the lack thereof. The essence of our trouble is the heart of man. Whose ideas about nature do we believe are superior? God's ideas or ours? Will we seek out God's design and plan for His creation or insist upon our own? However, mankind answers these questions will determine our future, and yet, regardless of how we answer these questions, one thing is certain. Behold, I make all things new. Revelation 21:5. This is the end of the book, There Might Be Hope. Thank you so much for listening. If you've missed any of the previous chapters, please go back, like, and subscribe to the channel, and you can go back on my YouTube channel and listen to any of the chapters before. Please also share this with your friends, anyone you would like to. And if you'd like more in-depth notes about some of the research that I did, some of the things I discovered as I was preparing the book, I will be sharing some of my notes on my patreon.com site. So you can go over there and get more information if you'd like to learn more. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.